Hey there! Welcome to Dirt Rich, seasonal conversations on food and farming. I'm Katie Federal with the Sustainable Farming Association. Today we're discussing the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program, which is a voluntary opportunity for farmers to get assistance and recognition for implementing water-protecting conservation practices. One of our guests is Mark Lefebvre. Mark is a conservation planner with Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District. He works with farmers and landowners to develop plans to address resource concerns affecting soil water quality and quantity using the certification program. Our farmer guests, Jen and Jerry Lahr, are recently Ag Water Quality certified through the program. They grow corn, soy, and custom-raised dairy replacement heifers at Lahr Heritage Farms in Cold Spring, Minnesota. Jen is also the Senior Director of Commercialization at the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute. They'll give us an overview of the program, share their firsthand experience, and talk about the changes that they've seen on their farm. Larry, Jennifer, and Mark, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today and share a bit about this exciting opportunity in the program with us.
You're welcome. Sure.
Glad to be with you.
Thanks. Well, Mark, why don't you give us an overview of the Water Quality Certification Program?
So the program started back in 2014, and we were part of the pilot. Basically, we're a local partner with the Minnesota Department of Ag. That's the main agency behind it. And we helped to kind of formulate the assessment process and the sign up and how to contact farmers. And it went so well that within 2 years, the program went statewide. So what it does is it's a good tool to have a whole farm assessment done on the farm. Primarily looks at the cropland, and it's based on the assessment on a runoff risk model. So it looks at the field physical characteristics, slope, soils, those kinds of things, and then looks at tillage, how intense the tillage is. Nutrient management, phosphorus and nitrogen particularly, what the farm's doing for pest management, and then if there's any tile drainage or irrigation can adjust the score up or down, and then if there's any conservation practices associated with the field, that can adjust the score up or down. So to be certified, you need an 8.5 score on all your fields and all your crops. So it's if a corn-soybean rotation, it would be the corn crop and the soybean crop are assessed. So 2 assessments per field. If it's, hay in the rotation, you basically need to do all the crops. And then all fields and all crops have to meet that 8.5 threshold. So what the farmer gets is, like you said, it's they get recognition, and that's probably the main reason that most farmers enroll in it. It's just saying that they're doing everything they can for water quality, and it's a good way to be proactive to show that farms are not just out, doing a lot of polluting. So it's a good thing for that. They get a sign, and actually in this area in Stearns County, they get a 12-pack of beer from Third Street Brewery as a kind of a bonus and a good way to help us, from the SWCD build relationships. The other thing they get is regulatory certainty for 10 years. So they're deemed in compliance with if any new water quality regulation comes into play within their 10-year certification period. And they also would get some financial assistance, up to $5,000 per year, to help implement practices that would improve their scores or help get them certified.
Right on. And from the scoring system that you described just briefly there, it sounds like it's not the program is not a certain set of practices that every farm will look uniform. Like, it allows for changing contexts and different practices to be applied depending on what they're working with on the land.
Yes, that's right. And the thing that I like about it is it's fairly simplified, and you can have a good discussion with farmers to see where they can make improvements. I would say one of the things that holds a fair number of farms back in our county is tillage. If we just discuss options to maybe cut some tillage, out some passes to help reduce soil loss. That's a good conversation to have, and everything's voluntary. We make suggestions, present options, maybe implement cover crops. I know that's a popular one lately. Put in buffer strips. We want to address any areas that may be prone to erosion. If there's any gullies in the field, we want to discuss, correcting that with grass waterways or what have you.
Jennifer and Larry, would you tell us about your farm and farm experiences?
Certainly. So the farm that our family is on was first in my family back in the 1950s. My grandfather bought the farm for the sake of providing a farm for my parents. We had dairy on this farm until 1987. And first of all, we're located north of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro, outside of a city of about 4,000 in population. We're about a few miles out of town. And luckily, the county we're in, I consider myself lucky. At least we've got a very diverse ag enterprise in Stearns County. A lot of dairy, good variety of crops that are grown here, not just your traditional corn and soybeans, but a lot of alfalfa, a lot of other crops related to forages for livestock are grown here. And so as my parents discontinued dairy farming, we kind of fell into a very traditional mode of crop farming for really decades following. And so in the late 90s, 4 of us 8 siblings in my family formed a farm partnership almost entirely for the sake of trying to keep the farm in the family and try to keep the farm small and so forth. And so there were 4 partners in Lahr Heritage Acres initially. 2 of my oldest siblings retired out of the operation about 6 years ago now, 7 years. And so it's just my brother Randy and I that are the partners now in Lahr Heritage Acres. And so that operation is strictly crop production. And then in addition to that, Jen and I operate the livestock entity essentially. So when we've been talking with Mark and his staff, talking about equip and so forth, there's generally the 2 entities at play then. So Jen and I as sole proprietors, and then also Lahr Heritage Acres. And so we're still small farmers by today's standards, I would say. Lahr Heritage Acres has 430 acres that they operate, 50 of which are irrigated. The rest is all dry land. And then Jen and I, in addition to the livestock, have just 45 acres of tillable land that we operate, 35 of which is irrigated. So very small farm by today's standard, but it provides a living for Jen and I. My brother does live off the farm and work off the farm, but it does help sustain our 2 families and my brother and I and our families.
And I guess I would add, growing up on a dairy farm, just about a half hour south near Litchfield, it's been a really great way for me to remain involved with my family's operation. Over the years, my family's dairy farm has grown and expanded, and they've opted to specialize in milking the cows and doing some of the breeding of the lactating animals on their operation. We've been able to partner with them by raising their dairy heifers. So it's been a nice way to maintain some connections to the farm I grew up on and helping them out, and also providing for a great way to raise our family and make sure that my kids have exposure to the very same animals that I grew up with, and also working with another farm nearby to raise their dairy heifers as well. So for a while there, we only had Jersey heifers, and now we have both Jersey and Holstein heifers on our operation.
And Mark, I understand you have some farming experience as well. Do you want to share a bit about that and then tell us what you do as a conservation planner?
Sure. I grew up on a dairy farm in Otsego. And after college, I went back to the farm and farmed with my dad and brother until 1999. So that was almost 20 years. we had some conflict, I guess. You don't need to put this in the recording if you don't want to.
Okay.
We were intending to expand the dairy, but weren't allowed to, I guess, by some local opposition is what it came down to. So we decided to sell the farm, and then my brother and I got jobs. So I after we sold the farm in '99, I worked for a seed company for a while, a co-op. I was agronomist, sales agronomist for them for a while, and then started with the SWCD in 2005. And I've been a conservation planner, nutrient management specialist with the Stearns SWCD for the past 16 years, I guess.
So Larry and Jen, what made you interested initially in the ag water quality program, and how'd you get connected with Mark?
Well, I guess the first thing I should say, compliments to the state of Minnesota and staff like Mark. There was a tremendous campaign for this program when it was launched. We were hearing about it well before I think it was even officially established in the different farm trade publications and so forth. We were hearing of this program getting developed. And so, I would say by the time it was officially established, we were well aware of what it was and the benefits it could provide to the state of Minnesota and then also to us as producers. So I think it was shortly after the program was launched, we were in at our local office, officially threw our name into the hat as an interested party. It did take some time to kind of work our way through the queue in that. I mean, we've always, I think, on this operation had an eye to what we can do in terms of better practices. I mean, the realities of farming are that margins are extremely tight, especially for an operation our size. Every dollar truly matters. Time is just as scarce as what money is in most cases for an operation our size. And so really, in many cases, it's valuable to us to have that local interface for learning these programs, or knowing that our interface would be our local office, literally, 15 miles from our farm, that would be administering the program in our case and going through the certification process. So a lot of comfort coming from that, and having worked with some of those same folks on other programs in the past. So with probably over consideration at times, fairly easy for us to make the decision to start the process some years back.
And I think I would just add, I would agree with Larry that it was a very well-known program to us, just based on the outreach and promotion of the program. But I think it speaks very well to Minnesota. It's hard to find a Minnesotan that's not proud of, the fact that we've got so many wonderful lakes in our region, and we're the source, the starting point for the Mississippi River. And so we have a lot of pride for our natural resources in the state, and we have a lot of pride for our operations. So when you can do something that melds both worlds and has a commitment from our operation to the sustainability of the land that we are stewarding, as well as promoting and protecting a valuable resource for our state, seems like a no-brainer.
And how was what did the process kind of look like for you? Like, if you could share a bit about the time frame, any steps involved, kind of walk us through.
Certainly. So I guess the main point it was incredibly simple and really seamless from our standpoint as producers. Mark and his staff really did all the legwork for us. So I mean, I know there are certainly steps to getting or certified and so forth, but that labor responsibility was not on our backs at all the way it seemed. There was some information we provided, but they did a fantastic job of reaching out to, in the past when I worked with them, they reached right out to our supplier for our egg inputs and so forth to get information more directly from them rather than having to be the go-between. So really it was just almost, no effort on our part to actually go through that certification process. Very simple and very seamless.
And I think as we look towards the future and implementing new practices, they're going to be our partner, and giving us, information about workshops and anything that we can participate in to gather more information. I mean, a lot of times when farmers implement new practices, they want to see what other farmers are doing, who have been implementing it for a while, have experienced and really understand, what it took to try something new, and what the pitfalls were, as well as the advantages, and having those connections to other producers is something that I think the SWCD has been able to facilitate. They know what's going on across the region, and so helping build that confidence from farmer to farmer, I think, is really important.
Mark, did you want to fill in any behind the scenes work or background on your end?
Sure. So part of the process was originally when Larry came in, he had requested some assistance, financial assistance for a feedlot and a manure storage system. So we, I guess, sort of opened the book up and offered, for him to also apply for the water quality certification program and anything else that he was interested in at that time. So that was part of that process. So at that time, that's why there may have been a little bit of a delay. So he was implementing some other things, including nutrient management through EQIP, along with the manure storage and feedlot project. And then when that was complete, we got back together, kind of finalized some things. I showed, the initial assessment results based on what I had for information from his ag supplier. And then we talked about options. Originally, there was, it wasn't quite at 8.5 on everything for a score. We discussed maybe tweaking some nutrient management, phosphorus management, and offered some options for irrigation water management as well. So that's when went to the next level. They agreed to do some irrigation water management, and then applied for some other assistance through an application for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. That was just this spring.
All right. So it sounds like a lot of different, we'll get to finances, I think, soon, but sounds like some different pots of money and different applications and programs that you can do while you're getting certified. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yes. It's kind of complicated, I guess. We can't just say it's one size fits all from the financial assistance side of it, because we've got some local grants. We've got, EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. That's, USDA funds. We've got some funds from the Department of Ag. So I guess what we try to do best is if we can sort of pair some of that funding together or separate, depending on where the farm is located, because we've got targeted funds as well. But that's our job, at the Soil and Water District to help and assist those farmers, access those funds.
That's fantastic, because it sounds like, Jen and Larry were aware of some of the funding, but to be able to have that assistance and find other avenues for funding and programs, that's such a benefit. I'm glad that happens.
Yeah, I think actually it makes the leap to establishing different practices on your operation easier. Not only having a partner like SWCD to help you through the process, but also the funding helps reduce some of the risk in terms of just getting accustomed and familiar with the different practices, giving you some ability to make some mistakes and hopefully not experience failures, but reducing the risk in terms of, okay, you're learning something new, you're incorporating that into your operation. It's not guaranteed to be a success in year one. You need to gain some skills and confidence, and I think the financial assistance provides a way to ease into it that way.
So Mark was getting into it a little bit, but Larry and Jennifer, if you want to discuss some of the specific practices that you implemented as part of your certification and maybe changes that you've noticed on your farm since doing that.
Okay, maybe I'll start with that one. I'll have Jen talk a little about kind of our current direction. And Mark alluded to, there was a program we began first. I think it was probably about maybe 2007 or so. We had started experimenting with EQIP on a nutrient and pest management basis. And that was a very simple process. There was financial assistance that came with it at the time to help transition somewhat, especially with regards to our tillage. We undertook a reduced tillage program through that process and really have never looked back. We were still using a moldboard plow back in those days or the years leading up to that. And that has not been hooked up to a tractor really in 14 years now. And I do credit our first positive experience with the EQIP to that. And so then we did some nutrient or some manure improvements, and we had EQIP and Mark and his staff right there with us through that. And so part of that, we did not have, for instance, a manure pit on our farm. In all the years of dairy, in the years of raising beef after that, never had a manure pit, for instance, or a stacking slab. And Mark and his staff helped us get that established as well. So through the years, we've seen some pretty significant changes come about through these prior experiences. And in 2021, we're on the cusp of some additional changes that I'm sure will be lasting as well. And those I'll let Jen talk a bit about in terms of what we're currently changing.
Sure. So what we're working on this year is really understanding how some of the irrigation management tools work. And really, it's a formula-based spreadsheet that allows you to not only track the rainfall amounts that you're receiving in your specific fields, but also couple that with other weather information and come up with a plan when you need to actually apply water through your irrigator. So that's been something that we are experimenting with this year. We officially begin that program in the coming growing season. And then through EQIP and the RCPP that Mark had mentioned, we are adopting some cover crops following our silage harvest, which actually will be taking place here in the next week or so, a little bit earlier than usual with our weather this summer and the drought. But following that silage harvest, we will be putting cereal rye on those acres, and then looking to follow that up in spring with a no-till planting regime. So working with other neighbors and farmers, we don't have the equipment that we would need to do it ourselves. So like I said, this gives us a way to really experiment with new cropping practices. And I think what we'll find at the end of the next 2-3 years, that this is probably something that we will stick with, and doing so, we can start to make some long-term investments in our operation and start to equip ourselves for maintaining those practices over time. The other thing that we're looking at, there's an interesting pilot going on in our region with the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, and they've partnered with the Soil and Water District, as well as, I think, targeting egg water quality certification producers to sign up over 50,000 acres, where this pilot would establish, pre-new practices, what the baseline soil health and water quality attributes of a particular field look like. And Mark can speak to this much better than I can, but because we've not had any cover cropping or no-till on our acres, we are actually, I think, a prime candidate for that pilot. And that pilot will help establish not only from that baseline, but when you start to incorporate cover crops or no-till practices, what is the actual verifiable, quantifiable carbon that you're sequestering through those practices. And all with the intention of gearing up for a national carbon market in the coming years. And so having some integrity behind the numbers in terms of what is actually happening in the soil, and using that information to provide credits to the market that the buyers have that can believe in, and also help educate other producers along the way.
And have you noticed, I'm curious, I mean, you mentioned the weather a bit this year. Do you feel like these practices that you've implemented so far have helped you during a drought season, or have you noticed any, I mean, you're kind of fresh into it, so I don't know if there's been enough time, but.
I think maybe we wish that we had implemented them earlier.
Okay. Yeah.
So possibly that would have been a benefit in terms of, if you're no-till planting, I understand that results in almost like a mulch situation where you can preserve some of the moisture in the soil. So, I mean, perhaps we would be looking at some slightly different fields had we no-tilled this spring. But it's hard to say. I maybe Larry has some observances that he can, share, but.
Yeah, I would say probably on a small scale. I do think some of the decisions we made in the past have helped us this year. It might be the worst drought year we've had in 30 years, I think. But, through our earlier EQIP experience, we focused on residue management, that there'd be more residue on the soil throughout the season. And it's difficult when you've got livestock production and you need that residue for bedding and so forth. But I do think some of the tillage practices we've changed over time have made a difference. And I think it's all just led to a little bit of a mind shift that we switched to 22-inch rows sometime in order to provide more ground cover throughout the season, for instance. And so a collection of these small decisions, I think, have provided a crop for it this year. As bad as it might be, there is a crop out there this year. Whereas in the last drought event, there simply wasn't. And I do credit part of that to some of these conservation practices, as small as they might be compared to other farmers. Some of those small things we had done years ago, some of those changes did lead to us having not a complete failure of a year in 2021.
Mark, from your standpoint, is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think so. It's a process to sort of convince or, have farmers change something that's been a traditional practice. Tillage is one of them that's very tradition oriented, I think, but we're gradually seeing more no-till acres, reduced till acres, more cover crops incorporated into those because they do fit together very nicely, the no-till and cover crops. So we are seeing some of that shift. I guess as far as the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium, or ESMC, we are looking to sign up more acres. Like Jen we're looking for 50,000 acres. And it has to be, like she said, a new practice. So that's for both carbon credits, water quantity, and water quality. So right now, this pilot that ESMC has started doesn't have a buyer. So the farm, if you enroll acres, you're not committed to whatever they're going to give you for dollars until there's a buyer established for the credits. And that won't be until probably 2022 at some point. And then the farm still would not have to be committed to ESMC. They could go to a different market. Bayer, Land O'Lakes' True Carbon is another market. Indigo has some. So there's multiple options to sell credits, especially carbon credits. So we're looking to sort of verify some of these things and kind of figure out how this process is going to work, because I've heard it termed, it's kind of the Wild West right now for carbon credits. And ESMC, I think, has USDA behind it. It has, local partners like the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, as well as the Nature Conservancy. So ESMC, to start with, we enroll a farm, and like I said, it has to be what's termed additionality as far as a practice, has to start new. You can't be doing no-till and cover crops for 5 years. That's not an eligible practice. So the Lahrs are actually positioned really well, like Jen mentioned, to take advantage of ESMC, the carbon market especially, because they are looking at adopting cover crops and no-till possibly. So as they get comfortable with that, I think they're positioned real well. So year one, we do soil sampling on the fields, and it's not a traditional nutrient management or nutrient soil sample core that's taken. It's a 2-inch core by like 1 foot. And it'd be similar to like a grid soil sample. And it's sampled for soil organic carbon, bulk density, pH, and phosphorus. And then the management on the field is put into a portal or into a platform. And then modeling is used to determine what the carbon credits or water quality credits would be based on what the baseline would have been, or benchmark practice, previous to the adoption of a practice. And then again, in 5 years, the plan is to come back and soil sample again to sort of true up what those actual changes were in the soil as far as whether it was phosphorus or carbon.
So this is potentially like an ongoing payment for the ecosystem services that the farmer is providing?
Yes, it would be a yearly payment, initially based on models, because it takes a while, especially for carbon, to sequester in the soil. After you've eliminated tillage or adopted cover crops, that carbon will build in the soil, but it doesn't happen in a year. So that's why the 5-year true up, as well as the best science can do right now is to sort of base it on modeling and experiments from smaller scales, to give the credit.
Okay, I see. And this is available to people in Stearns County, or is this a statewide program?
So the pilot is the Sauk River watershed plus 30 miles outside of it.
Okay.
It was originally going to be only the Sauk, but it was expanded because of this additionality requirement and the fact that it's probably going to take more acres to get the 50,000 goal that we're after.
Okay. So this is one of the, variety of opportunities that the SWCD will have, in their minds as available funding to help sign farmers up for when they apply for the certification program.
Yes, as well as any other assistance, whether it's technical assistance, if they come into the office and want technical assistance or financial assistance for, I would say, soil health kinds of practices, we will have a discussion to see if they're interested in the ESMC pilot, because it makes sense, because they're looking to adopt something new, and it fits in real well. So it's one of those things that we can kind of stack to get the farmer maybe some more financial assistance.
That's really exciting, because the program itself feels like an opportunity, but then like underneath that, there's an assortment of other methods of support that you guys are consolidating. So that's really helpful.
Yep.
And I asked this of Jennifer and Larry a bit, but I'm wondering, since you've worked with a variety of farmers, after that initial help with funding, are they seeing a pretty good return on their investment financially with any of the practices that they're able to implement?
Yeah, I think so. The farm business management throughout the state, through the different community colleges and whatnot, they are tracking that, and they can sort that, the water quality certified farms. And they are showing a good return on investment for conservation practice adoption. And we've been involved in a small project where we're looking specifically at the return on investment. We got 3 farms initially through the Headwaters Ag Sustainability Partnership that we have going. And we're looking to expand that to 10 farms so that we can get to your question and be able to confidently tell farmers as we discuss these things that, yes, long-term, there is a return on investment for adopting these kinds of practices.
That's great. I mean, I hear anecdotally some farms are able to share that, but yeah, having a broader data set, I think is so beneficial. Jen and Larry, did you have any other additional comments on like finances or funding sources?
Well, I guess I've seen some interesting data that's still very early, and this is not necessarily related to the water quality certification program, but just in terms of no-till and cover crops. The data is basically following various size farms through their kind of journey through these different practices, and they're tracking, but basically, profit and loss. And it's been interesting to see, where there are some potential savings with, cover cropping and no-till, whether it's, reduced inputs or less fuel on the farm. But understanding also that some of those longer term, like the productivity and fertility of the soil is not necessarily in years 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are later on and coming yet for some of the farms that they've been watching. And so I think it'd be interesting to see just in this micro region that we're in, starting to understand some of the costs and benefits for these different practices as it relates to the annual expenses for the operation, as well as are they seeing increased yield per acre, or potentially even some other benefits in terms of just quality of product.
So Larry and Jen, what words of wisdom or advice would you have for farmers who are considering applying for the certification program? Any tips and tricks?
I don't know if there's any tricks, but I think you need to establish a relationship, if you don't have one already, with your local soil and water staff, and help them understand your operation as well as what your goals might be for your farm. And I think you'll find them to be very, very supportive and great resources, probably beyond what you were anticipating in going in with the request, that they have access to a lot of information and great contacts. No matter what the question is, it doesn't have to be limited to the Ag Water Quality Certification. It can certainly be a multitude of other programs. So I think I would emphasize just building that rapport with your local office.
I feel I'm very fortunate that I've been able to travel a good part of the country throughout my life, and I do see a lot of, especially in the Corn Belt, you see a lot of room for improvement when it comes to our egg practices, and our farm is definitely in that same category where we've always had a conventional approach to producing our crops. A lot of room for improvement probably. And I just think of it kind of, maybe to use an old analogy, think about, our soil and water conservation district, for instance, that, they've got people that are in their choir in that church at all times. And we have people that we know in our area that are early adopters of new practices, or practices that are primarily environmentally based. And then there's all the rest of us who are just the congregation, the sinners in the congregation. And I guess that's the thing. If you get those of us in the congregation start adopting these practices and have positive things to say about it, hopefully it's not too long before the others in the congregation start sharing that message as well. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and each small success begets the next attempt. So I think even, amongst my friends, I don't think they really understand how difficult financially it can be to farm. And so if we were ever to experience a failure, on half our acres, or even, 50 acres, it can take a long time to recover from those sort of things. So to head down that path and to know you've got a little bit of a safety blanket through some of these programs. And then the technical assistance you get from the staff, like Mark, it basically makes those decisions very doable for even a small operation like ours.
Mark, there's one piece of the program that I don't think we've talked about quite yet. Could you tell us a bit about the endorsements? Seems like it's a relatively new piece of the certification program.
Sure. So along with being water quality certified, that's the first requirement before you can get an endorsement. The Department of Ag has developed various different endorsements. One is for wildlife, one is pest management, one is like a carbon credit endorsement. So that's sort of icing on the cake on top of the certification. There's an assessment that you have to meet, like for the wildlife one, you have to have enough acres that would be either dedicated to habitat, whether it's in CRP or woodland, pollinator habitat. So there's certain requirements that need to be made, as well as the other endorsements. So the carbon one, depends on what your tillage is, if you have perennials in the rotation. So it's like a separate assessment on top of water quality assessment.
Excellent. Well, great. Does anyone have any additional thoughts or resources that they would like to share before we wrap up here?
I just thought I'd point out that as silly as it might seem, I do credit especially our local offices, but the fact that there is actually the recognition portion of this whole program. And it's interesting because my brother and I, or my siblings and I, we always kind of want to be left alone in our operation. The last thing a farmer wants is attention drawn to them, because it's usually not for positive reasons. But in 2021, it just doesn't work that way. There's all sorts of reasons for farmers to be looked at critically, and to have some positive recognition does certainly count for something these days, even for a group that tends to want to just be left alone. It does mean something for sure. And it's interesting, we had an experimental crop we worked with on our farm in 2020, and it was just amazing the amount of attention it got, literally even down to the metro area, we found out. And so people do pay attention to what you do as farmers. And it's good. I'll be honest, we got the water quality certificate sign at the end of our driveway. That does make me proud to drive by that. That recognition portion is important to us internally, just from an altruistic standpoint. But it is these days where you're under such scrutiny. If you leave any sort of manure on the road or anything of that sort, you certainly get that attention. And it's good to have recognition of the positive things that we try to do as producers as well.
Absolutely. I just heard my coworker and co-host Jared this weekend talking about how some people will even take that sign to their farmers market if they go to farmers markets, and that's like a great way to invite conversation and connection with potential customers about it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And Mark, if people are ready to get plugged in and apply for the program, is their first step to reach out to their local soil water conservation district office?
Yes, that's what I would suggest. If you're interested in water quality certification, reach out to your county SWCD office, and they can put you in touch with if there's an area certification specialist, or if they have somebody in-house that would actually work with you for the assessment process.
Larry and Jen, if people have questions about your experience or about your farm, where can they reach out to you?
I guess probably by phone or email, I suppose. My phone number is 320-761-3925. And email, a little unorthodox, but it's thenewcountrycat@yahoo.com.
Excellent. Mark, did you want to give yours as well?
Our office number is 320-251-7800, extension 3. And my email is mark.lefebvre@nacdnet.net. So I just want to thank Larry and Jen for agreeing to do it as well. That is can be a challenge for me when I get asked to connect with some landowners or farmers. But having willing people like Jen and Larry is great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and it wasn't just lip service. It's been fantastic working with you and Tessa and everyone. It's just, I tell my farmer friends all the time, I know people like to complain about the government as it relates to their feedlots and so forth. And I know those bad experiences are probably out there somewhat, but as much as I can I tell people it's been nothing but positive experiences for us on this farm. So let's hope that goes on for many years to come. It's been fantastic.
I appreciate that, Larry. Thanks.
Yep.
Is that all off record, or can I include that? Because that was very kind.
Either way, doesn't matter. You're the editor.
Dirt Rich is produced by the Sustainable Farming Association. We believe that agriculture, done well, heals. For more resources or to tap into the Farmer to Farmer Network, visit us at sfa-mn.org.